The question is, of course, how are these fortunes divided? This can be seen in this graph. All private wealth is listed here: real estate, monetary funds, capital, equipment of companies. Monetary assets make about 1/3, 32%, and more than a half consists of real estate. The majority of people don't possess real estate. All real estate is owned by about 1/4 of the population. The total sum of wealth is quite considerable and amounts to 9,920 billion German marks in 1993, or expressed in euros, 4,560 billion. A survey is carried out every 5 years, and the allocation of wealth shows interesting results. There are different groups of households with the labels A, B, C, D, E, F, G. The first two groups, A and B, stand for about half of the population, but they own only less than 10% of the total wealth. The major part of wealth concentrates on the two last groups, with a share of about 50%. Half of the wealth is in the hands of 10% of the population, and the other half in the hands of 90% of the population. If one considers that the top of the graph ends at 5 millions, the wealth column of a billionaire would be 200 times as high as the highest column in this graph. Of course, billion columns are very thin, but by their very height they are quite relevant. The following graph shows a comparison of growth rates during the last 5 decades in the sectors monetary assets, gross domestic product, and net wages. In the first 2 decades, the relation of increase between net wages and monetary assets was about 1:3. In the meantime, it has climbed up to 1:50. Since the growth of the national product is only nearly linear, net wages have fallen back since the 80s. They still have grown, but with ever smaller growth rates. That means that the working population is less and less participating in sharing the results of the economic output and its increase. On the other side, monetary assets gain the more. Why is this development of monetary assets so dramatic? Since from a macroeconomic view, monetary assets and debts are identical figures, they cannot but grow at the same pace. Because all savings that someone puts aside from his income cannot only be lent out, but they must be borrowed by somebody else in order to close the monetary cycle. Otherwise, the money would be missing in circulation and arouse a deflationary recession. That's why all surplus money has to be fed back into the economy. This detour via loans, however, causes an ever bigger volume of interest flows. In order to make it more comprehensible what this means for an individual participant in the economy, we can divide the sum of all debts by the number of participants and compare this share with his annual disposable income. The income columns for the given 3 years are kept equally high, although the absolute figures are quite different. They are given below the respective columns. In this way, the ratio between income and debt share can be compared. In 1950 it was 1:1. In 1975 the debt share was twice as high as the income, and in 2000 the ratio between income and debt share was 1:5. In 1950 the share of interests for these debts was 6%, and an average worker had to work for it about 3 weeks per year without having borrowed money on his own. The larger part of this interest share goes on top of monetary assets,